punctually. So we will now begin with the agenda as planned.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the last plenary session of this assembly. We will begin with item 12, statement by the GEF Independent Evaluation Office. The assembly has before it document GEF/A.7/06, seventh overall performance study of the GEF. I invite Mr. Juha Uitto, Director of the Independent Evaluation Office, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Minister Matsusawa, and very good afternoon to all of you. It's been 20 years since the GEF Council established the independent evaluation function in the GEF, so we have some reason to celebrate this time. Evaluation, of course, was built into the GEF instrument because the facility would be informed by science and evidence, and it would be innovative. However, it was only in 2003 that the decision was made by the Council to make the GEF evaluation function an internal independent office. In this connection, so I would like to recognize the efforts of my predecessor, Rob Vandenberg, who played a key role in establishing the office and leading the office for the first 10 years. Rob fought the crucial fights to ensure that evaluation would be truly independent, transparent, and methodologically strong. And this is the foundation that we are building upon today. As an independent unit, the Evaluation Office reports directly to the GEF Council, but we also engage actively with all parts of the GEF partnership. This is very important for us to remain relevant. Our main objective is to promote accountability and learning in the partnership. We are accountable to the Council, including both recipient and donor countries, to report on the performance, impact, and progress of the GEF interventions. We contribute towards ensuring that the programs and projects of the GEF are designed and implemented efficiently and effectively. But equally important, with regard to learning and knowledge sharing, we provide evidence-based lessons on what works, where, how, and why. Every 4 years, the IEO provides a flagship report under the rubric of overall performance study. That's why we call it OPS, or more recently we've been calling it the comprehensive evaluation of the GEF. This report draws on 3 years of evaluation work and synthesizes findings and lessons from in-depth evaluations and studies that we have conducted during that period. The overall performance study, or the comprehensive evaluation, addresses a spectrum of issues ranging from GEF's performance and impact of its projects and programs to ensure that the recipient countries and the global environment, for that matter, get the best results of the GEF. But we also conduct institutional evaluations looking into issues related to the GEF policies regarding crucial issues such as gender, involvement of indigenous peoples, and the engagement of the private sector, co-financing, and systems for results monitoring and measurement. and we engage actively in knowledge management. The GEF, to my knowledge, is the only institution that conducts such comprehensive evaluations regularly every 4 years, which then, in their turn, regularly and directly influence the programming and policy directions for the next funding phase. I'm very pleased that the governing and decision-making bodies of the GEF consider evaluation findings and recommendations when deciding on the next steps. For example, and this is just an example of how our influence has been reflected in the GEF programming, is that the current GEF funding phase included the establishment of an innovation fund, and that was directly in response to the recommendations of the previous comprehensive evaluation, the OPS 7. Well, I'll now let you watch a short video capturing our 20-year evolution and providing some highlights of the OPS 7 and its findings and recommendations. So please enjoy. Welcome to a special celebration marking the 20-year anniversary of independent evaluation at the Global Environment Facility. With great pride and excitement, we honor the remarkable journey of the IEO, the Independent Evaluation Office, a body that has played a vital role in enhancing the effectiveness, learning and accountability of the GEF in tackling global environmental challenges.
Over the past 2 decades, the IEO has conducted rigorous evaluations to assess the relevance and effectiveness of GEF interventions across different country contexts, GEF focal areas, as well as the institutional framework and policies of the GEF.
We conduct project portfolio and program evaluations,
and thematic evaluations to dive deep,
and country evaluations to examine GEF support at the national level.
Corporate evaluations, which assess the GEF strategies, institutional arrangements, and policies.
Every 4 years, GEF replenishments are informed by a thorough and comprehensive independent evaluation of GEF results and performance, shaping the future direction and funding priorities of the GEF. The IEO's latest evaluation, OPS 7, finds that the GEF remains highly relevant in addressing urgent environmental challenges, continuing to respond to the conventions through its support of focal areas and integrated programs.
The GEF continues to maintain a strong record of overall project performance and sustainability of outcomes despite the recent COVID pandemic.
While GEF resources are modest compared to some more recent and larger climate funds, the GEF has mobilized nearly 10 times that amount in co-financing.
GEF projects support development of enabling environments and strengthening of country institutions. Medium-sized projects have been instrumental in encouraging innovation.
The GEF's Small Grants Program has enabled small-scale local organizations to actively participate in green recovery efforts.
The shift towards integrated programming on priority environmental issues and systemic transformation is significant, widely seen as a strategic innovation of the GEF.
The GEF has supported innovation through its willingness to fund less established technologies and pilots, often accompanied by transformational change.
GEF policies on safeguards, gender and stakeholder engagement are consistent with global good practices.
We remain at the forefront of environmental evaluation, applying a spectrum of methods, including geospatial analysis and artificial intelligence, alongside other quantitative and qualitative approaches.
OPS 7 notes some of the challenges of the GEF going forward.
Some of these include continued competition between GEF agencies, clearly articulating an acceptable level of risk for the GEF portfolio, generating environmental and socio-economic benefits at scale, and cumbersome administrative requirements for enabling activities, MSPs, and the SGP.
Based on the evidence and conclusions, OPS 7 makes several recommendations which were adopted in the programming directions for GEF 8. These include demonstrating the additionality of the integrated programs, reappraise the vision for the SGP, review the requirements, processes, procedures for GEF, establish clear ground rules for GEF agency interactions, and develop tailored strategies for country engagement, increase support to LDCs and SIDS, strengthen private sector engagement, pursue innovative projects to advance transformational change and clarify acceptable risk levels, strengthen the monitoring of GEF policies, results-based management, and promote knowledge sharing.
The scale of global environmental challenges is vast, and the path to a greener recovery will be different for each country.
With a record-setting replenishment and accumulated experience of over 30 years, the GEF is well positioned to address the global environmental challenges ahead.
As we celebrate this 20-year milestone, I express my deepest gratitude to the dedicated IEO team and our partners for their contributions. I am very proud of our accomplishments over the past 2 decades and confident that independent evaluation will continue to play a central role in addressing the world's pressing environmental challenges. Thank you for your attention, and I think this was an opportunity for you to meet some of our staff members who, basically everyone is here, so if you can catch them still this afternoon, so please do so. But in general, I just wanted to end by saying that as the GEF programming is evolving and the GEF is moving more towards integration and inclusion, as CEO has mentioned, we have to continuously also ensure that the evaluation methods and approaches that we use will also provide timely and relevant inputs to the decision-making process at the GEF, and we are working on that definitely. Time flies, so stay tuned for the 8th comprehensive evaluation that will be there in a couple of years, and it will come your way quite soon. So thank you for your attention again.
Thank you for that report. Are there any comments from the floor? Okay. I see none. So, yes. Yes. The Assembly takes note of this report. The Assembly will consider item 11, statement by the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel. The Assembly has before it document GEF/A.7/07, report of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel. I invite the chairperson of the Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel, Dr. Rosina Bierbaum, to address the plenary. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I think my PowerPoint will be coming up. I'm always happy to follow our other independent agency, the IEO, but I do not think the science panel is quite so much of a movie star as UHA is. I do want to start by acknowledging that the conference center where we are all gathered is on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And so I want to express our gratitude and recognize that we are gathering on lands and waters that have been stewarded since time immemorial. So thank you very much. I'm going to be focusing on some of the emerging signals and trends that STAP thinks will be important drivers, both positive and negative, which will affect us as we all go forward. So in our horizon scanning mode, we reviewed many exercises, and this shows some of them. UN agencies, regional and national government reports, think tank reports, and scientific organization and private sector organizations. And we put all of these signals into 4 categories, basically intensifying ecological trends, societal changes, economic shifts, scientific and technology advancements. But of course, these are not really separate categories. They're all interconnected and they interact. Let's look first at the ecological trends. We know that science indicates climate change impacts are intensifying and occurring with increasing frequency. This year is likely to be the warmest on record, and actually more than 40% of the world's ocean temperatures experienced a heat wave in June and July. Temperatures off of the Florida coast reached 32 degrees Celsius last month. That's bathtub temperatures, and that's harming corals and marine life, and it can fuel bigger and wetter storms. And according to NASA, there's also been a clear increase in the number and intensity of wildfires worldwide. In the EU, more than 180,000 hectares were burned already this year, which is 40% above average. We've all heard recently about the Maui wildfires with more than 100 lives claimed. And as we've heard many times this week, massive wildfires are still burning here today in Canada, with thousands still under orders to evacuate their homes in British Columbia. And more fires are expected in the Shuswap region, where I think more than 11,000 people remain under an evacuation order. On biodiversity, the WWF Living Planet report shows that monitored global wildlife populations have plummeted almost 70% in the last 50 years. And WRI's Forest Watch shows that the rate of tropical forest loss worsened this year, with the equivalent of 11 football or soccer fields being lost every minute. And of course, on waste generation and pollution, a recent study concludes that we've exceeded the carrying capacity of the planet for waste, and at a pace that is outstripping our ability to even assess and monitor them. The societal changes we found to be common include these: positive changes in behavioral change and choices and spending decisions, because there is more public pressure to act positively on the environment, but also the increasing influence of youth leadership on societal issues. As we've heard, they are angry and they are motivated and they are organizing. And more than a third of consumers are actually, especially younger consumers, willing to pay more for sustainable products and services. Against that positive news, there are some countervailing forces, though: a loss of social cohesion, more polarization, misinformation, and a vigorous public debate about equity, about gender equality, about diversity, and about inclusion issues, and those could hinder progress on the environment. And at the bottom there, climate change, the pandemic, and technology are really changing the nature of work. They're shifting our commuting patterns, which could reduce congestion, could lower noise pollution, could improve air quality, could reduce greenhouse gases, but could also erode a sense of community and collaboration. On the economics and finance front, addressing climate change and other forms of environmental degradation has really created a quest to transform our current economic system. And back in Da Nang at our previous assembly, I featured the circular economy as an emerging approach. And the concept is now, 5 years later, widely embraced in China, in Japan, in Chile, in South Africa, in Laos, in Kenya, and Morocco, and many other countries. And the multilateral development banks are also encouraging and promoting circular economy. We're seeing new financing modalities continue to evolve, such as blended finance, debt for nature swaps, and blue and green bonds. And the green bonds are funding renewable energy and transportation infrastructure in countries such as Colombia and Egypt and India and Indonesia, in Chile, Uzbekistan, Nigeria, Fiji, Thailand, Mexico, and Benin. Debt for nature swaps are redirecting resources to both climate and biodiversity conservation, again in many countries, Belize, Gabon, Barbados, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, Ecuador, Cape Verde, and Lao PDR. And there is, as we've heard this week, a growing interest in project finance for permanence, or PFPs as they're called, for large ecosystem conservation projects. And the wonderful example of the Great Bear Rainforest PFP to support the First Nations and all that it has achieved since 2006, just north of here, demonstrates how inclusive design and management of natural resources can also empower the local communities and engage the mind and the hearts of youth and excite them about conservation. And the GEF is playing an important role in supporting the PFPs in Brazil, in Colombia, and in Peru. And the volume of environmental and social governance, ESG bonds, was also up 14% last year. And their efforts to strengthen nature and biodiversity aspects to avoid greenwashing and to deliver what these ESG bonds promise. We know that capital markets will play a really important role in accelerating capital flows towards nature-based climate solutions and biodiversity protection. And then let's look at emerging S&T. Amazing things are happening. Biodiversity conservation is now using technologies such as camera traps, bioacoustics, GIS, remote sensing, mobile apps, eDNA, environmental DNA, as well as networked sensors, digital mapping, and drones. And so mobile apps are providing new ways to gather biodiversity data through citizen science all around the world, and examples in India and Papua New Guinea and New Zealand, things like iNaturalist, like Marine Debris Tracker, like Project NOAA, and like BirdLog. And then eDNA, or environmental DNA, exciting new tool. Every individual of every species leaves behind genetic traces of itself. So we can study the ecology and biodiversity of an area by determining the species living there. So it can be used to search for rare species. We really want to know if they're there, where the endangered species are, but we also want to detect invasives early. So combinations of drones, satellites, and bioacoustics are helping us protect biodiversity and manage forests in Latin America, marine life in Indonesia, and we can even track individual elephants in the Garamba National Park, which led to a reduction of 97% of poaching. There's also emerging science and technology and climate change, both good for mitigation and for adaptation. Lots of new technologies, including photovoltaic and wind systems, green hydrogen, next-generation batteries, AI, machine learning, blockchain, smart manufacturing or 3D printing, and new kinds of plastics. And just one example, there's more than 300 floating photovoltaic systems that have been installed this year, and they're expect to grow by about 20% a year. And the GEF is actually funding right now a floating photovoltaic renewable project in Tuvalu. And we can also use satellites, AI, and other digital technologies to pinpoint emission hotspots to track carbon pollution across supply chains, and therefore we can monitor in real time and verify. But new tools, as I said, are also helping with adaptation too. AI, machine learning, and other digital technologies can improve the prediction of extreme climate-related events and warn people in harm's way. So, for example, Google's flood hub is being used to provide early warning to high-risk areas in Bangladesh and India. And in 2021, they sent out more than 115 million alerts. And now the system is being expanded to cover South Asia and South America. Another example is the AI-supported Firecast data platform developed by Conservation International for tracking fires in the Amazon and in Indonesia. And integrated sensors that can be accessed now through the internet are helping farmers adapt to changing water availability as climate is changing. So there's one called SWAMP, which is Smart Water Management Platform. And this is a project in Brazil, Italy, and Spain that's analyzing water use to optimize irrigation. And already it has been determined to reduce water use some 20 to 30% and reduce energy use. There's also new emerging technologies on the pollution front. We know that blockchain and other distributed ledger technologies can help track products and materials through their life cycle. 3D printing can reduce emissions and minimize the cost of producing things, the material use and the pollution impacts, and kind of encourage the circular economy. And for example, 3D housing in Kenya and school buildings in Malawi reduced the construction CO2, carbon dioxide emissions, 70%, compared with typical housing projects. And new sensors are improving pollution collection data, and that gives us real-time information and transparency and helps us with decisions. And chemistry is helping us deliver alternate ways of making both plastics and textiles. So we can make textiles and garments from pineapple waste. And a child project in the GEF Chemical Supply Chain IP is supporting banana plant waste for textile manufacturing. And so it's very exciting that the GEF is embracing these S&T applications in climate, in biodiversity, and in pollution. That's great. But the A in STAPS is advisory. So GEF should also be considering more appropriate use of many of these technologies as it's moving towards GEF 9. For example, using artificial intelligence to facilitate natural capital accounting, piloting the application of a new generation of energy storage and digital tools for climate adaptation. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that these emerging technologies, while they can help address environmental challenges, do also come with risks. For AI, blockchain, et cetera, there are concerns about their environmental impacts, including increased energy consumption and the use of scarce natural resources and end-of-life management of associated hardware. So we're going to need sustainability standards and circular economy approaches to help address these. Environmental DNA, eDNA, can inadvertently capture genomic information from humans just as readily as from the intended target species. Well, that raises ethical dilemmas of consent, privacy, data ownership, and again, we'll need to develop appropriate regulations and frameworks on how eDNA should be used. And unless the issues of equitable distribution and access is addressed, and technologies are developed inclusively, there is a high risk of increased capital and power concentration among a few, and with consequent negative effects on social cohesion. I want to say, though, the GEF is addressing ways to integrate responses to these triple planetary crises by being nature positive, climate positive, and pollution free. And maybe you see that most clearly by looking at this diagram of the new integrated programs. You can see how they straddle the climate space in yellow, the nature space in green, and the pollution space in orange. And also, some of these IPs are deploying some of these identified emerging solutions. So, for example, a child project in the net zero nature positive IP is doing agrovoltaics. And in the Mesoamerica IP, there are projects using eDNA technology for biodiversity monitoring. And many of them, as you know, have new business models and financing mechanisms. And of course, STAP also believes that the new Global Biodiversity Framework Fund and the Agreement on Marine Biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions provide new opportunities to implement some of these emerging economic and financing models. So in this last segment, I would just like to take us back to some of the recommendations STAP made in our report to Assembly, which I actually presented at the last 2 council meetings. And we've delivered papers on all 5 of these. One was encouraging a clear risk framework and more systematic approach to innovation to guide which emerging solutions the GEF partnership supports. Policy coherence, we encouraged a GEF-wide strategy, which they are working on to address policy coherence across all operational levels so we can ensure that investments are durable and address the triple societal, economic, and environmental issues in ways that are really reinforcing and prevent leakage. Create a knowledge management and learning system, as we are doing, to capture lessons from projects and solutions that then can feed into future GEF investments. And very importantly, include stakeholders from communities to government in the design, in the choice of goals, and in the implementation of GEF projects, so that the wealth of knowledge and expertise among stakeholders contributes collaboratively. STAP's last recommendation was to leverage external partnerships because they can have a catalytic effect on transforming systems. And this assembly has focused on partnerships to integrate across sectors and multilateral agreements to advance financing, to improve governance. But uniquely, this assembly has put partnerships with Indigenous peoples, women and youth, as the CEO has said, in the center, in the plenary. And that is absolutely one of the key pieces to achieve transformation. We need the heart, the mind, and the spirit all joined together. We need to respect all cultures and all ways of knowing. And STAP was very proud to hold the first Science Day at an assembly to focus on youth and Indigenous cultures, and with 80% women speakers, and to listen and learn from their passion and wisdom. We heard a lot of commonality across the week about the power of knowledge, about trust built over sustained interactions, the promises of new tools and new treaties and new money, the importance of systems thinking, and really loud and clearly the necessity of making progress with inclusiveness, community, and very importantly, new voices. And this slide just has a short form of some of these. The whole of society approach, as the CEO said, business as usual is not possible. And so we spoke extensively about how we need the private and philanthropic community to be involved, how we need the governments to be involved, but this assembly focused on the youth, Indigenous people, local communities, and women. And we were reminded many times, none of those groups are monolithic. They're diverse cultures, diverse goals, diverse experience, interests, and ways of knowing. We need inclusive, interdisciplinary, and safe collaborative spaces where we can have conversations as much about listening as speaking, and with respect and humility. Co-production of knowledge from local people, Indigenous people, women, youth, that means involving civil society in the vision of what changes may be needed in ways that they want it to change, and to keep them involved in making it happen. And we can't wear people out from over-collaboration, so we've got to network our networks and make learning and best practices available. Citizen science, we need to excite people about conserving nature and solving climate change, and educate communities in ways that resonate with different cultures and different regions and different languages that they understand, and sensitive to their ways of knowing. And we've got to make that information available in places they look and in multiple languages, Apparently, the youth don't read GEF documents or STAP documents, and we've heard the recommendation of Jeff on TikTok, which I leave to our CEO. But we do need to do better outreach. Valuation of nature came up over and over. The value of improving management and use of natural resources, but also the value of stop doing damage to the environment. We need to value both. We need to design for scale up. No one-offs, whether we're talking about projects or dialogues or collaborative processes. As we heard many times this week, we must all row together and be building to positive tipping points to a sustainable world. And a wonderful phrase we heard yesterday, we have to harness planetary knowledge. This should be, I think, our mantra going forward. So let me finish with a challenge to you all. Our collective response in the GEF family, all of you in this room, has been to call for transformation in all sorts of ways. We are now midway into GEF 8, and GEF 9 is already staring down at us. My challenge to all of us is how can we make this really more than rhetoric? And as the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia said, vision without implementation is hallucination. We have the vision, let's get on to the implementation. This amazing, now expanded, inclusive, and collaborative GEF family with an all-of-society approach has the wisdom and the power and the determination to transform the future for all generations. One mind, one heart, one spirit. But you didn't think I'd end my presentation without some very special wonders of nature. And all of these from the Kitasoo-Hehe territory just north of here, and now all being preserved in perpetuity in a PFP. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that report. I now give the chair back to Minister Hussain of Canada.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. The next item is item number 17, report on credentials. In accordance with paragraph 6 of the Rules of Procedure for the Global Environment Facility Assembly, the credentials of representatives and the names of alternates and advisors shall be submitted to the CEO. Delegations have submitted their credentials via email to the Secretariat in advance of the meeting. The Bureau of the Assembly has examined the credentials and prepared a report that is before the Assembly in document GEF/A.7/10. The Assembly is invited to take a note of this document. Seeing no objections, so decided. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing and asking to come to the floor to make a few remarks the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Oh, no, sit down. I haven't said anything yet. Thank you, Ahmed, Minister Hussain, for everything. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Merci à tous ceux qui se sont joints à nous, aux membres du Fonds pour l'environnement mondial et au PDG Carlos Manuel, aux ministres et aux représentants du monde entier, aux jeunes, aux dirigeants autochtones et aux dirigeants de la société civile. In the past few days here in Vancouver, we've made real progress to protect nature. And before I talk about that progress, I want to talk about the moment we're all in right now and why this matters so much, what you're doing here. Canada is in the midst of our worst wildfire season ever. In fact, we're at a point where it's hard to even articulate the devastation we've faced this summer alone. As we speak, tens of thousands of people have been evacuated in the Northwest Territories. Fires are ripping through British Columbia, as all of you have seen from the smoke outside. Every part of this country has been affected this summer, from wildfires destroying homes, to communities welcoming evacuees, to respiratory problems aggravated because of smoke that travels hundreds of kilometers. A few days ago, I met with evacuees from the Northwest Territories. And earlier today, I was in Kelowna, West Kelowna, and West Bank First Nation, which have been hit incredibly hard by fires, to meet with local leaders. And as I thanked some of the local firefighters, it was especially poignant to know that for a number of them, even as they were fighting against blazes in one part of town, they knew their homes had just been destroyed in another part of town. This is real and is being felt by Canadians from coast to coast to coast, and more extreme weather events are being felt by people, particularly the most vulnerable people, everywhere around the world. For us here in Canada, keeping people safe is always job one. That's why we've deployed the Canadian Armed Forces to help fight fires, and we're supporting provinces and territories with everything from equipment to evacuation plans. And as we've done for places across the country, we'll be there to help people rebuild their lives and their communities. So that's the context in which this meeting has been held. Wildfires across Canada in a summer of deadly heat waves, droughts, and storms across the world. When we ask ourselves why these disasters are happening, and with a level of devastation that we have not seen before, the answer, of course, is complicated. But we know that climate change is key to the story. Hotter, drier springs that turn into hotter, drier summers, for example, which turn our forests into giant tinderboxes. And we know that nature loss plays a role too. As we lose natural ecosystems that would normally absorb the pollution that drives climate change, things get worse. And then, in turn, more ecosystems are lost, fueling a vicious cycle. To put it in perspective, wildfire emissions in Canada for this season alone are already over twice our record for a whole year. The disasters we're facing as a world are not just bad luck. Of that, there is no question. They are being driven by climate change and nature loss. The question is, therefore, what are we to do about it? Some, including some politicians, have tried to sell us on ignoring the environmental crisis, whether that's climate change, biodiversity loss, or pollution. Or they say that we have to choose between making people's lives more affordable on the one hand or protecting our planet on the other. Well, that's just plain wrong. I wake up every day and think about how I can help make life more affordable for Canadian families. That's what our grocery rebate, or our work to build housing, or our $10 a day childcare is all about. And I also wake up every day and think about how to keep people safe from things like wildfires, and how to protect the world that our kids and grandkids will inherit. These goals don't contradict each other. In fact, working on one must help us achieve the other. And I'm not just talking about how our pollution pricing cuts emissions while putting money back in people's pockets, although of course it does. I'm talking about how protecting nature helps us create jobs and support local growth. En décembre dernier, le Canada a accueilli le monde à Montréal pour la COP 15. Et l'engagement mondial de protéger 30% des terres et des eaux de la planète d'ici 2030 a attiré beaucoup d'attention. Et ça le devrait, parce que c'était une réalisation majeure. Ici au Canada, ça fait des années qu'on redouble nos efforts. En 2015, moins de 1% des zones marines et côtières du Canada étaient protégées. Et aujourd'hui, c'est plus de 14%. Le Canada a également protégé des centaines de milliers de kilomètres carrés de terre. L'année dernière à Montréal, le Canada a fait une autre annonce importante. On a annoncé notre soutien à 4 projets majeurs menés par des Autochtones. Des projets qui vont créer des emplois et des opportunités pour les communautés locales, tout en protégeant de vastes étendues de terre et d'eau. Last December at COP15, I announced support for 4 new Indigenous-led conservation projects, including one right here in BC. In total, these projects will represent almost 1 million square kilometers. And that's a big number. But it's not actually what makes these projects so special. These projects, designed by communities, for communities, will create a conservation economy where caring for the land can become a career opportunity. Protecting nature is as much about preserving precious ecosystems as it is about supporting local communities and creating sustainable livelihoods. This is something we've demonstrated in Canada, but as important as that is, it's just as important to do this work everywhere around the world. No one country, no one people can pretend anymore that what happens or doesn't happen on the other side of the world doesn't matter to them. And not just doesn't matter even in an abstract way, but doesn't matter in a concrete, affect your daily lives way. These past few years, whether it's been through a pandemic, through global economic crises, through conflict, or through climate change, we have all learned just how interconnected we are and how directly responsible we must be for each other. No country and no people can simply shrug off what happens on the other side of the world as their problem, not ours. People and communities everywhere need to see investments that will secure their future, both their economic well-being and the well-being of the nature that supports them. And that's why the work you have done here in Vancouver matters so much. In Montreal at COP15, the world agreed to set up a new global biodiversity framework fund to help protect nature, halt biodiversity loss, and build a sustainable future for generations to come. Here in Vancouver, together, we have launched that fund in record time. I'm looking forward to seeing contributions from leaders at upcoming international summits this fall, and I want to recognize the contribution that has already been announced by the United Kingdom. For our part, as the host location for COP15 and this assembly, Canada stepped up as the first country to contribute with $200 million. Because if the promise of this country is that every generation should be better off than the last, then that should be a promise we make to everyone, everywhere, too. Les changements climatiques nous touchent tous. Et pour trouver des vraies solutions, les pays du monde entier doivent tous unir leurs efforts. Ensemble, on peut préserver la pureté de l'air et de l'eau. On peut offrir aux gens du monde entier, y compris aux plus vulnérables, une chance réelle et équitable de réussir. Et on peut bâtir un avenir qu'on sera fier de laisser à nos enfants. It's time we secured the promise of a better future for everyone. And that is exactly what we are all doing here today together. Thank you very much, my friends.
Thank you, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, for that, for those engaging remarks. I'd like to now take a few minutes to really thank, in my capacity as chair, the Assembly for your energy, your commitment, and your engagement throughout the week. It has really been a pleasure to chair these proceedings. And I'm really encouraged with the progress that we have made together. And as a host country, myself and my colleague and friend and minister, Stephen Guilbeault, we're very, very proud in the establishment of the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund and in announcing Canada's seed funding of $200 million. This fund will play a pivotal role in addressing biodiversity loss by working in close partnership with developing countries, by offering consistent support to Indigenous-led climate initiatives, and by prioritizing inclusion and gender equality. These are the key principles for Canada that are in lockstep with our feminist international assistance policy. And as we start to conclude the Assembly, I know we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I leave here with a renewed sense of hope, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose. And I'm excited to work alongside the Global Environment Facility as we keep advancing on our shared environment, climate, and biodiversity goals. Le gouvernement du Canada est fier d'avoir été votre hôte cette semaine. Je tiens à remercier sincèrement tous nos partenaires qui nous ont aidés à rendre cet événement possible. I would especially want to take this opportunity to thank members of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations who have graciously welcomed us to their traditional and unceded lands and territories. And with that, I will conclude my remarks as your chair. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. « I now invite my vice chair from Nepal to come back. Japan, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Minister Hussein. The Assembly will consider item 14, statement by a representative of civil society organizations. I invite Akhtutarazama Sano, Chair, CSO Network, and youth representatives, Flaviola Monzon and Manal Baidar, and women's representative Ana Di Pangracio and Sidika Sartana to report to the Assembly on the Partnership Day that took place on Wednesday.
Mr. Chair, Excellency Ministers, Council members, government delegates, GEF family members, indigenous people, youth, gender, and my beloved civil society representatives, good afternoon. And on behalf of the GEF CSO network, thank you very much. First of all, my special thanks to the Prime Minister of Canada for his so inspiring message that brings a hopes for us to fight against all forms of disasters, all forms of challenges, and particularly the fire is coming, so we will know how to fight against it. This is a great honor that I stand here to present you the civil society position paper to complement and to add value in the efforts of the investment of the GEF and the work of the governments have been carrying out. My special thanks to the GEF Secretariat for facilitating this auspicious event, organizing, bringing all people from the globe, and thanks to Canadian government for supporting all this. Dear Excellencies, thousands of civil society actors around the globe, represented by more than 100 civil society here, declare our strong commitment and solidarity to stand with you, to complement in your efforts, and to make our all possible supports to address all forms of climatic challenges. The evident in front of us, the global warming is increasing, the extreme weather events are increasing, and we can see the forest fire. We couldn't see the blue sky. So the challenges are coming up. Last 30 years, the GEF has been investing more than billions of dollars to fight these climatic situations. And the report from the staff and our experiences, we can see the level of increasing challenges are much more than before. It means that we are fighting, we are changing our future because of we are not controlling. And the evidence is what we have been doing, how we have been doing, that was not enough. So we have to come out from this the way we have been addressing the challenges. We need innovation. And I would like to thank our CEO, Carlos Manuel, and council members that they have been promoting issue of innovation. To us, innovation, when we think for innovation, then we need to rethink what we have in our mind, what we have been doing, should we stand on it, or we come out from that box, stand on the roof, and then open to the sky and see what is new need to be done. I strongly believe, and we should think for new way of addressing this risk. If we want to fight, we have to quantify what level of risk around us. We need quantitative issues, we need qualitative values. And then we need to follow the latest technology, because the GEF, it stands on the model of 90s. Now it is no more. With this issue, I would like to end my message with a short recommendation. The GEF 8 should educate our generations, children, youth, university students, so that they know what is GEF. The visibility of the GEF last 30 years was not enough. So we have to rethink in a new way. Education should be a cross-cutting issue for the GEF, each project. The GEF projects and programs should be more dynamic and less time-consuming. A project comes from the GEF to the implementation level that takes really longer time. Please find a way. Limit within 6 to 8 months, not more than that. Make the system, make the policy more robust for the people of the world. The policy is one of the biggest challenge and biggest barrier. So we have to come out with this old policy to a new policy. And then we have to use our all forms of latest technologies and latest mechanisms so that the risk of the climatic issues can be addressed. Governments should be allowed directly access to the resources to the GEF. And GEF Secretariat should be empowered more so that they can support the governments. In the same time, we need science-based technology to monitor with real-time data. Without the real-time data, that would be very difficult to see what real progress is coming. Particularly the new fund, Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, that should have this quantitative scientific value before we go for any implementation. So we know at the end of the day what progress made, what could be done, what are the challenges, and how it can be addressed. With this expectation, I again thank you very much, and I wish that latest technologies, all new way of thinking, innovation will take place, and we will save our generations, future children, and we will be having a safer planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sano. Now I would like to invite youth representatives, Fabiola Monzon and Manuel Baida, to the podium. I hope, oh, okay. So now you have the floor.
Thank you. Muchas gracias por las palabras. Distinguidos delegados, Secretaría de GEF, participantes y demás personas presentes. Estamos agradecidos con la Secretaría por la oportunidad de compartir las perspectivas de un diverso grupo de jóvenes en esta 7ª Asamblea del GEF. Estamos motivados por el liderazgo de la Secretaría de GEF en el desarrollo de una asamblea más inclusiva, incluyendo participación significativa de los grupos titulares de derechos, niñez y juventudes, mujeres, pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Recomendamos encarecidamente hacer de este un esfuerzo permanente para todas las futuras reuniones de la GEF. Como juventudes, reconocemos completamente la urgencia y la complejidad de la crisis socioecológica y los cambios transformadores necesarios. Nuestras sociedades sufren por las desigualdades, la contaminación química descontrolada, pérdida de la biodiversidad, degradación de los ecosistemas, desertificación y el cambio climático. La única alternativa que tenemos para revertir la era de destrucción en la que nos encontramos es fortalecer nuestras alianzas. Debemos superar las barreras artificiales que crean una desconexión entre los humanos y la Madre Tierra y que nos alejan de los procesos de creación de políticas públicas ambientales. Como muestra del espíritu colaborativo que nos ha unido a las juventudes aquí, nos unimos para ofrecer las siguientes recomendaciones.
We encourage the GEF to co-design a long-term effective youth engagement mechanism in collaboration with the existing youth constituencies across the MEAs. We also encourage increased integration of participation of young people in active GEF processes, panels, and programs such as the GEF Scientific and Technical Advisory Panel, STAP. As the financial mechanism of the conventions, we welcome the increasing recognition of the GEF, of the central roles IPLCs, women, and youth play in implementing and driving the necessary transformation on the ground despite being underfunded. As such, we strongly recommend increasing the support towards all of these groups and enhancing access to such funds across all programs. In particular, we strongly encourage the GEF to collaborate with youth to review funding accessibility challenges faced by youth engaged in all of the different processes and identify solutions to overcome such challenges. And support capacity building efforts and microgrant programs to implement and replicate youth-led projects starting with grassroots levels. We fully appreciate the time and effort engaging youth into this process, and we are dedicated to having regular interactions with the GEF with our full commitment to achieving the aforementioned recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I invite women's representative, Ana Di Pangracio and Sidika Sultana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear delegates. The Women and Gender Caucus at the 7th GEF Assembly is a self-organized coalition of women's networks, organizations, and gender allies united under GEF diverse agendas, fostering a human rights-based approach, social and gender justice. We are here using our voices to speak for us, for women and girls all around the world, for our communities and the generations to come. Biodiversity conservation, climate change adaptation and mitigation, waste and pollution eradication, focusing on plastics, toxic chemicals, and hazardous waste, including industries workers, mostly female, and sustainable use of land and water, they are all intertwined, long-term endeavors. These critical objectives require unwavering collective action and cooperation that include women and girls-specific knowledge and contributions. Only this way we will ensure sustainability, resilience, and a just world.
In this context, we are convening 4 key demands, and as we have always had, we are here to collaborate to make them a reality. First, not only the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, but all GEF programming should be gender responsive, community-led, and context-bound. All resources should address gender-specific challenges and opportunities. Secondly, and in parallel, the GEF needs an urgent reform to ensure women's accessibility to equitable and adequate funds. It is imperative to address financial constraints faced by women's organizations, in particular indigenous, Afro, descendant, and local women's groups. We also ask for gender-specific projects at the GEF. We welcome the 20% of the GBFF committed to IPLCS. We call for this to be done in a gender-responsive manner, ensuring indigenous and local women's direct access to funding. Thirdly, funding procurement mechanisms should be simplified, the application processes streamlined and tailored to grassroots women realities. These mechanisms have to be a tool for change and not an extra load to the triple burden women and girls are already carrying. Finally, the GEF should increase its support for women's organizations to strengthen and amplify women's agencies to advocate for their rights and contribute to effective policy implementation. This is because we are in a strategic position that links international policy shapers with on-ground action. In this line, recognize the Women and Gender Caucus as an open and democratic platform for direct participation and make use of the ongoing restructuring of the GEF to ensure their direct engagement in the GEF decision-making process, including its council.
This is a practical matter. If you want to achieve global environmental benefits, you have to include women. We are not beneficiaries, we are key right holders. We are not asking for loans or charity, we are here as partners and co-investors. We are here together to give face to the crisis we are undergoing, an extinction and social environmental crisis that risks the survival of all species in this, our only planet. It is a matter of justice, a matter of human rights, it is a matter of dignity and historical redress. In all GEF processes, for instance, its assembly, we need to ensure interpretation, remote accessibility, streamlined and improved logistics to truly have everyone on board. We are in front of the biggest GEF replenishment ever. Let's not miss this historic opportunity. Enough with the talking, we need to act now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those strong messages of support. Are there any comments from the floor? So I would like to invite Garina Angarova from IPLC. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sembana Hundutunuhudud. This is a greeting in my native language. I am here to speak on behalf of the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group to GEF that has been working actively to promote improved support for partnership and engagement with Indigenous peoples and local communities. And we had deliberations during the Partnership Day, and the main questions that we posed for these deliberations was, how can the GEF improve its support for and engagement with Indigenous peoples and local communities? And we have come up with several recommendations for after these discussions. So the first one was that we hope that the principle of do no harm can be reformulated into do good to reflect the level of ambition and to move from sort of a reactive to a more proactive approach at GEF. The second set of recommendations was regarding finance. We welcome the decision to allocate 20% of the newly created GBF fund, but we also hope that the level of ambition for Indigenous peoples should not only stay within the newly created GBF fund, but also remain a priority within the primary trust funds of GEF that achieved its historic level of replenishment of $5.25 billion. Additionally, we also think that one modality is not enough. One modality of access to the funds is not enough. Indigenous peoples come from diverse places, circumstances, and that we hope that you can consider multiple approaches and modalities of access. And there is a plea to really simplify access and provide flexible funding for Indigenous peoples. Next, I just wanted to bring that up to your attention that governments globally are moving towards green energy transition. However, these technologies require a lot of land and they require a lot of resources. Think about it, 54% of all so-called transition minerals or critical minerals are located either on the lands or within the proximity with the lands of Indigenous peoples. And those lands coincide with biodiversity hotspots. And I think that GEF needs to pay attention and have a concerted response to this existing and really growing risk. We also hope as IPAC that we are able to conduct our own outreach, have your support to conduct our own outreach, and facilitate capacity building for Indigenous peoples. That's absolutely critical. Further, the rights of Indigenous peoples should be respected. Key issues such as land rights, including the land title, free, prior, and informed consent, are simply non-negotiable if we're talking about 30 by 30. Communities should be at the center of the 30 by 30 discussion and implementation. This change of attitude to having Indigenous peoples and local communities should be recognized in national planning and instruments, implementation, such as NBSAPs at all levels. So GEF has been a major supporter of protected areas, but GEF must accelerate and increase support for Indigenous peoples and local community-led conservation programs. And ICI, the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, is just a first step. Finally, my final point is that recognizing the unique challenges in the implementation of 30 by 30 in terrestrial and marine spaces, and that the principles should be equally applied both to the land and to the ocean. 30 by 30 is an important concept, but the challenge is the implementation. Examples from Tanzania and Namibia and Chile highlighted how traditional approaches have led to many problems. For example, Indigenous peoples have been dispossessed as a result of government programs for protected areas, leading to frustration, leading to displacement, sometimes even murder of Indigenous peoples. Every day, we hear about murders of Indigenous peoples from all 7 sociocultural regions of the world. And regions such as the Pacific are heavily dependent on resources from the sea, and recognizing these nuances are absolutely important in a tailored approach with indigenous peoples' participation in the implementation of 30 by 30. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful statement. Now, are there any comments from the floor? I see none. Thank you very much for all the statement, and the Assembly take note of this statement. The Assembly will now turn to Agenda Item 18, Summary of High-Level Roundtable Discussions. Following the program of events, we have had 11 parallel high-level roundtables that allowed delegates to hear about and to discuss more in depth a number of issues that will be essential to the GEF in its 8th replenishment, and will also help it to start looking towards the 9th replenishment. To give the Assembly a feel for the ideas that arose and were discussed in those roundtables, I now give the floor to Mr. Richard Bontgier from Australia.
How do I get the presentation up? No, it's not up yet. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Do we have the PowerPoint presentation?
Okay. Thank you, everyone. During this 7th Assembly of the GEF in Vancouver, 11 high-level roundtable sessions were organised around key aspects of GEF 8 programming, strategies and vision. The discussions focused on how the GEF partnership can tackle pressing environmental challenges and support transformative change under the overarching themes of healthy planet, healthy people. The roundtables were composed of a wide range of distinguished speakers from different sectors, including government, international organisations, environmental conventions, the private sector, civil society, youth and Indigenous peoples. This report contains the key messages from each roundtable and sending it back to the GEF plenary to ensure that the future of GEF's work is informed by the latest cutting-edge thinking from the collective partnerships and experts. Roundtable 1 covered policy coherence across sectors. There we go. Narrow across sectors and narrow the nature and climate financing gap. It examined the role of policy coherence in narrowing the gap in resources needed to restore and protect nature and arrest climate change. Current international, political and scientific conversations are converging around the conclusion that global environmental sustainability goals can only be realised if the funding gap to nature is narrowed, and this should be a focus and priority of all governments. Closing this gap requires increasing financial flows from all sources, reducing financial needs by eliminating perverse incentives. Improved policy coherence can enable countries to further catalyse the impact that national financing has on nature, enhance domestic resource flows towards investment required to achieve critical environmental goals, align private and public investment, and eliminate perverse incentives that conflict with nature and conservation efforts. Policy coherence is an essential component of maximising the benefits of nature investments and in the sustainability of those benefits. This roundtable has provided insights from the perspective of representative decision makers. In GEF 8, we have incorporated policy coherence in our work. In partnership with the recipient countries and the GEF agencies, we hope to make this issue a major priority in the future. Roundtable 2. As global environmental changes have become increasingly profound, there is a clear urgency to develop solutions that are driven by the best available science and supported by appropriate policies. Science, environmental practice and economic transformation are showing that the integration of environmental actions is key to advancing transformative change in these systems. Yet policy options to support such integration remain inadequate across multiple dimensions, from local to national and global. Importantly, policies need to be informed by science to most effectively tackle environmental challenges. Bridging the science and policy nexus is therefore a critical need for successful delivery of the Healthy Planet, Healthy People agenda, and for transforming urban, energy and food systems towards sustainable and nature-based solutions. Bridging science and the policy nexus for Healthy Planet, Healthy People will require an inclusive and fully engaged, diverse group of stakeholders. This needs to be accompanied with social learning and sharing of knowledge across all groups involved. The third roundtable dealt with pathways to a net zero positive world. Climate change and biodiversity loss are two of the most pressing crises that humanity is currently facing. Responses so far have been largely inadequate and have failed to meet the ambition that would be required to limit temperature increases below 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century, while ensuring biodiversity is protected, restored and sustainably accessed. Since these crises are fundamentally interconnected, the solutions would also need to be. Increased coordination is essential between actions taken to address these twin crises. Long-term, ambitious, inclusive, coherent and nature-positive decarbonisation strategies will be required in the future to guide investments and policy reforms in developed and emerging economies towards the common climate and nature goals of 2030. Only this will ensure humanity gets onto a pathway to net zero and a climate-positive world. Roundtable 4, Zero Waste and Circular Economy. The global economy today is largely based on a linear take, make, waste model in which over 60 billion tonnes of natural resources are extracted per year and over 13 billion tonnes of waste are disposed into landfills, incinerators and waterways. This consumption is resulting in natural resource depletion, greenhouse gas emissions and ecosystem degradation. Future action to tackle this challenge requires shifting to a circular economy, which is a closed-loop regenerative model that keeps products, components and materials at the highest value and functionality for as long as possible. Based on the principles of reduce, reuse, recycle, the circular economy addresses the entire life cycle of products, including eliminating unnecessary material production, extending the life of products through reuse, refill, repair, rent, resale and repurpose, and improving recycling efficiencies, including market demand for recycled material. Only with such a restorative approach to production and consumption will we have any chance of achieving a circular economy. Roundtable 5, Sustainable Cities for People and Planet. With more than half of the world's population living in urban areas, cities have a profound impact on the environment, while being at the forefront of the consequences of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Cities will also present immense opportunities to tackle these challenges through appropriate policies, planning, investments, and innovations. These opportunities, and with leadership, can make the key global actors to achieve climate change, nature and sustainability goals necessary for a healthy planet and healthy people. Fortunately, cities are showing leadership on climate action and an increasing interest in nature-based solutions. The GEF has been central to this urban leadership across the globe and will continue to invest through Sustainable Cities Integrated Program. Future action will need to focus on bringing together mayors, national leaders and urban experts to work at the intersection of integrated urban planning with nature, sustainable finance and climate policies, and ensure that nature and biodiversity is essential to transforming urban systems at the global scale. Roundtable 6, Conserving and Restoring Nature. The Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was adopted during COP15 at Montreal late last year. This historic framework sets out an ambitious pathway to reach global vision of a world living in harmony with nature by 2050. These international commitments are laudable and necessary, but governments must now work with scientists and other relevant groups to ensure success in their implementation and evaluation by using inclusive and evidence-led approaches. Choosing the appropriate areas, increasing representation, and making conservation and restoration effective will depend, among other things, on spatial targeting based on multiple criteria. Better targeted approaches to restoration and protected area establishment are especially needed in regions with inadequate representation of diverse ecosystems and habitats, and where shortfalls of suitable land for conservation occurs. A lasting and sustainable set of outcomes will also require that we fully engage and genuinely engage with Indigenous communities and local communities in the implementation of action to conserve and restore nature. A comprehensive, innovative and inclusive approach that focuses particularly on women, youth and Indigenous people is not only desirable, but absolutely necessary. Roundtable 7, Promoting an Integrated Approach Towards Food Systems Transformation. Today's food systems generate $12 trillion in hidden social, economic and environmental costs. Agriculture occupies about 38% of the world's total land area, and unsustainable agricultural expansion has resulted in significant loss of forests and biodiversity, land and soil degradation, and greenhouse gas emissions. Unless food systems globally become more sustainable, they will continue to drive loss of biodiversity and ecosystem functions, land degradation, greenhouse gas emissions, resulting in reduced production of nutritious food, eventually leading to malnutrition, food insecurity, and migration. In order to transform food systems for the future, we'll need to take action on governance and policy and increase financial resources to promote innovation and novel solutions for sustainability. We will also need to take calculated risks to achieve impact at scale, such as through novel approaches in the domains of policy and finance, technology and management practices, and social change. And finally, we'll need to design for resilience in the face of multiple, plausible future scenarios and building institutional and financial mechanisms if we are to transform food systems into carbon neutral and biodiversity friendly systems. Roundtable 8, Beyond Inclusion, Youth, Women, Indigenous Peoples and Environmental Leaders. Time and again, evidence shows that supporting women, youth and Indigenous peoples as environmental leaders is effective and efficient in delivering global environmental benefits, and as I said previously, essential to achieve those. At the same time, barriers to inclusion are varied and numerous, ranging from legal structures to institutional and family dynamics. Access to resources is often challenging for organisations that are new, small, grassroots, informal, or otherwise lack the required capacities and experience. This roundtable focused on identifying ways for the GEF, the wider GEF partnership including governments, and similar institutions to support diverse leadership, in addition to increasing inclusion in local and in global environmental governance. To reach this goal, women, youth and Indigenous peoples must be viewed and treated as leaders, not beneficiaries. And echoing what was said earlier, this is a really important point. leaders, not just beneficiaries. This must transcend all aspects of our work, from project design to implementation, ensuring co-roles for these important stakeholders. It is also clear and very simple that we will not meet the goals of the multilateral environmental agreements and the Sustainable Development Goals without supporting diverse leadership and inclusion. Roundtable 9, Managing for Environmental Results and Transformative Change. A push for environmental results is at play across the GEF partnership. A growing number of countries are monitoring the progress of their investments and evaluating their impact in more effective ways. Community-led initiatives generate global environment and socio-economic benefits and use data to hold governments accountable for tangible results. Conventions also embark on managing for results by setting ambitious goals for the planet, while donor countries encourage providers of financing to devise more impactful strategies. The GEF has been at the forefront of managing environmental results for 3 decades, with integrating approaches now in place to achieve transformational change. The GEF has set ambitious targets in GEF 8 and established a results management architecture that builds on its results experience. This is also the basis for ensuring that present and future investments are impactful and learn from actual empirical data and knowledge. However, business as usual approaches are not going to be sufficient to drive the systemic and transformational changes across the GEF portfolio. System changes require greater innovation to explore ways of delivering global environmental benefits at scale. We also need to be prepared to take well-informed risks that increase the likelihood of wider impacts while reducing avoidable risks that may undermine the chance of success of the GEF. Roundtable 10, the GEF's future with new agreements and emerging themes. Building on recent landmark decisions on the High Seas Agreement and biodiversity, as well as the ongoing discussion on plastic pollution, including the marine environment, the GEF Assembly offers an opportunity for a critical stocktake for the future of the GEF, and with new agreements, landmark decisions, and for exploring emerging modalities and innovative approaches to address these emerging themes for the global environment. The new and emerging global agreements and frameworks that are relevant to the future of the GEF include the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, BBNJ, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, INC, on plastic pollution, and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Convention on Biological Diversity. These new and emerging multilateral agreements and frameworks are influencing and shaping the GEF's future. Looking ahead, we need to strengthen governance and align country needs and convention goals. The pathway forward would also need to offer concrete opportunities for non-state actors and partners for action and unlock new resources as is mandated in the new Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. And finally, we should not be afraid of change if we are to succeed. Lastly, Roundtable 11, Catalysing Climate Resilience and Adapting to New Realities. Climate change is only one of today's most urgent, complex and insidious challenges impacting water and food security, infrastructure, poverty and health. For the GEF, which seeks to explore integrated solutions to the world's most challenging environmental problems, it is critical to ensure that solutions being conceptualised today for the developing world are able to withstand climate change impacts and enhance climate resilience in the long term. This requires science and innovation, human and institutional capacity, and scaled-up predictable funding. It also requires collaboration and partnership within and across a range of stakeholder groups, including youth and women and the private sector. This roundtable focused on highlighting opportunities for catalysing innovation and investment in climate change adaptation and resilience for the future investments in the GEF. Recommendations coming from the deliberations indicate that the increasing scale and pervasiveness of climate impacts requires an urgent increase in public and private investment and inclusive adaptation and resilience. Future progress to ensure lasting and sustainable outcomes in all of the environmental areas will need to focus on more and better innovation. Blended finance, and integrated programming across the GEF. In closing, I would like to thank all of our distinguished guests and panellists who have contributed to the roundtables and to send clear and powerful action messages to the GEF. We will ensure these messages help guide our future strategies and investments. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Bontugère for his report. Are there any comments from the floor? So no flags? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bontugère. The Assembly takes note of this report. The Assembly will now turn to Agenda Item 16, presentation of the Chair's summary. In accordance with paragraph 24 of the Rules of Procedure for the GEF Assembly, the Chair, in consultation with the Bureau, has prepared a summary of the main discussions and conclusions of the Assembly. The summary of the Chair is contained in document GEF/A.7/11 that has been distributed by email. Unless I hear any comment, the Assembly takes note of the summary. We have therefore concluded the main items of the agenda for the 7th Assembly of the Global Environment Facility. I thank you for this efficient and substantive work. Now, as we close this 7th GEF Assembly, I would like to invite the CEO, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, to make his final address to the Assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Integration, inclusiveness, impact. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. These are the three words that I would like us all to take away from this Assembly: integration, inclusiveness, impact. When we speak of integration, we speak of integrated solutions, integrated finance, and integrated partnerships. And integrated partnerships is inclusiveness. We hear loud and clear the need for a whole of a society approach that brings to the table all stakeholders. We need to recognize and hear the voices who have not historically been part of the decision-making and the grant-making mechanisms of the GEF. These are the voices of civil society. Not only are they the ones whose livelihoods and rights are most impacted by the current state of our environment, they are also the ones who are the key to its protection and sustainable use. Only by being inclusive can we move to the next level to have the impact that is needed. The nature and climate financing gaps needs to be reduced. And the funds that exist for reducing this gap are limited. This means that we need to maximize and multiply the sustainable impact of every single dollar that is put towards this gap. And these impacts need to be sustainable and long-lasting. Every conversation we had this week at this Assembly has been with this ultimate goal in mind: integration, inclusiveness, impact. These three interconnected themes have been everywhere around us this week. And so this Assembly has not been the GEF Assembly, it has been the GEF Partnership Assembly. And our VIPs of this Assembly has been the members of civil society, the indigenous people, local communities, and yes, the youth. The Global Environment Facility is not the GEF Secretariat. It is the huge family that I see here before my eyes in this room. It is you, it is every single one of you in this room. We thank you all for being part of the GEF partnership. We thank you all for being part of the GEF partnership and for all the coming together on this journey. We promise you, we promise ourselves, we promise our children that we will work together to deliver what is needed. Let me once again express my sincere thanks to the Government of Canada and all associated Canadians partners for making this event happen. We have been greatly honored today with the presence of Prime Minister Trudeau here in our GEF Assembly and deeply inspired by his remarks. Finally, and not least, I would like to acknowledge my colleague, William Elhurst, who is ending his tenure with the GEF Secretariat after 18 years of hard work. Since he joined the GEF in 2007, William built and led the country relationship team to assist countries in optimizing GEF resources. He later became secretary to the Council, facilitating the smooth delivery of many Council meetings, and he has led the organization for 4 assemblies. He has been mentor to many GEF staff, and he has been a valuable reference to countless countries' delegates around the world. William is not just my trusted colleague. He has also become my friend. For all his years of service to the GEF, we thank you. Please join me in a big round of applause of appreciation for William. Thank you so much, and I turn you back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel, for your very inspiring message, integration, inclusiveness, and impact. Thank you so much. We come to... Yeah. Now we come to the end of the historic GEF Assembly, where we all agreed and renewed our strong commitments to halt and reverse the unprecedented global biodiversity loss, and we also affirm our collective will to tackle the triple global crisis. It is my great pleasure to have chaired this important session. Thank you, the Chair, His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Hussein, and the fellow Vice Chair, His Excellency Mr. Prakash Mahat, for your excellent chairmanship. Let me express my sincere appreciation to the host government of Canada to host us in the beautiful city of Vancouver. My appreciation also goes to the local communities and indigenous peoples to have us in the unceded lands. The knowledge and wisdom of the indigenous and traditional communities tell us how to coexist with nature. Thank you, ministers, delegates, representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities, women, youth, business, academia, UN, and international organizations, and all other participants for their engagements and participation. And of course, Carlos Manuel, again, for his wonderful leadership in the preparation and organization of this very successful assembly. And through him, all the staff of the GEF Secretariat. We received professional service of the interpreters, always. Appreciate that. The last but definitely not the least, I appreciate the hard work of conference services, security staff, and everyone who supported the conference. I wish you a safe trip back and see you soon. Au revoir and sayonara. Thank you very much.
Thank you. William will explain us where are we inviting everybody to celebrate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind words. And thank all of you for your appreciation. It's been a delight to work with you all and with your predecessors for this number of years. So thank you very much for your kindness. So now it's time to celebrate the end of another assembly. And I sent you all an email. I hope you received it. But to make clear, we are going to gather in the Pan Pacific Hotel. You go up the escalators, 2 floors, and there's a large space. We have a wonderful artist, Carlos Hiller, who will put on a show for us. And then we'll just enjoy camaraderie, social encounters, chatting, and why not a bit of drinking and eating too. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.